Hello, it is I, a crazy madman. Or something like that, I guess. Whatever. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy this came out at an opportune time where actually I'm on break. Badger now has two jobs, so a lot of scarcity on the channel you should expect, honestly. Let me see. Description box, there's things, click buttons, and yeah. Also, I bring forward to y'all all the time my worries about being a parent, of which I've got many. So many worries about being a parent. So many. Especially being the bearer of the two parents. And whoever says moms are better parents, y'all are full of it. So yeah, I got so many worries. Like, daycares. Daycares. So much low energy, unmotivated, just people that don't want to be there, doing just a job and that's it kind of people. No thank you. Or weirdos, which are everywhere. You'll never get rid of them, and you'll never be able to completely and totally avoid them. So yeah, weirdos as well. On top of that, here's one thing that I will never, ever, ever, ever do. Ever do. Never. And that is get a babysitter. I'm serious, though. I'm very serious. MrBallen, the world's worst babysitter. Let's see what this is about, shall we?
In 1999, a father arrived at a train station to pick up his teenage daughter from school. But when the train she was supposed to be on arrived at the station, she didn't get off. And so the father just sat in the parking lot, assuming his daughter must be late and she'll be on the next train. But as more and more trains came into the station, none of them were carrying his daughter. And so eventually, this father just left the parking lot and headed back home, believing his daughter must have found another way home. Unfortunately, though, that was not the case. It would turn out his daughter had made a fateful decision that day that would soon turn her and her family's lives into a nightmare. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format...
Okay, I get it. Okay, people say you shouldn't panic. Okay, don't panic. But have a freaking plan at the very least. Have an idea of what you would do, where you would go, where to look, and why, who to contact, right? Like, so many lame brain parents nowadays. I swear. I really swear. So many lame brain parents. You know what? Most people ain't even parents anymore. They're just barely even like a human that happened to have another human, and that's about as far as it goes. Stuff like this really irks me. Let's continue.
Then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please soak the like button's underpants and then place them in the freezer. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads.
Good thing I have been going commando for years, so no one could ever do this kind of stuff to me. Oh, man.
Okay, let's get into...
The poor like button, by the way. And also, I'm purposely pausing to piss some certain people off that are just like, ah, ah. All right, let's continue. Let's continue.
Today's story. In 19...
Love MrBallen's intro.
In 1998, the Barber family was living a charmed life. Michael and Elizabeth had been happily married for 20 years, and they had 3 beautiful daughters who ranged in age from 9 to 15, and they were all thriving. The family lived in a very modest, plain-looking home in Melbourne, Australia, but the second you stepped foot inside of that home, you would see it was bursting with life. The sounds of kids laughing and playing, and of Michael and Elizabeth happily chatting away filled every room. Now, the Barbers' lives were not perfect by any means. In fact, they struggled financially and lived basically paycheck to paycheck. However, they didn't let their financial struggles define them. Instead, Michael and Elizabeth put a lot of stock in another aspect of their lives that they were all undeniably rich in, and that was in creativity. Michael was a toy maker and a designer, and Elizabeth worked in children's literature. And each of the three Barber children were beginning to cultivate their own unique creative gifts. At 9 years old, Heather, who was the youngest, had developed a lovely singing voice.
Oh, great. Oh, it's the train. Okay, cool. Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, great. Great. And they probably just let their kids do whatever willy-nilly as much as they want, huh? I'm not sorry for feeling the way I do about people being really lame brain parents and being weak, soft, pathetic parents on top of that.
Ashley Rose, who was the middle child at 11 years old, had learned to play the flute. But the Barber's oldest daughter, 15-year-old Rachel, was really the star of the family.
And I'm not saying creativity is bad. I'm not saying that at all. But people tend to go to extremes very quickly. And then they're like, oh, to allow creativity to flourish and blah, 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 you have to have no restrictions. And it's like, all right, now we're gonna let the video just play, and I'll stop interrupting. Okay.
In fact, they called her that, Rachel Starr. Rachel was an extremely talented dancer. She was so graceful and stylish that even when she was just walking around, it almost looked like she was dancing. Rachel was also very beautiful, with big emerald green eyes and fair skin, and she had this effortless charisma that just drew people to her. From the outside, Rachel really did look like the kid who had everything going for her. But, like the rest of us, Rachel had her own struggles. Like she was not a natural student. No matter how hard she tried, math and science just seemed impossible to her. And Rachel had a number of acute fears that really made certain aspects of her life very challenging. She was deathly afraid of the dark, she was afraid of talking to strangers, she was afraid of navigating the public transportation system on her own, and even just the thought of going into a store by herself filled her with immense dread. As a result of having these fears, Rachel was actually very dependent on her parents. Her mother, Elizabeth, would jokingly say that Rachel was 15, going on 18, going on 12. Eventually, when Rachel's anxieties and fears, combined with her struggles with traditional schoolwork, put her into a bit of a depression, her parents decided they needed to step in and take action. They wanted their Rachel Starr to be happy. They wanted to encourage her and nurture her strengths. And the thing that they knew she loved the most and was the best at was dance. So in September of 1998, Michael and Elizabeth allowed Rachel to drop out of her traditional school and transfer to a full-time dance school in Richmond, which was an inner-city suburb of Melbourne located about 20 minutes away from the Barber's house. And once Rachel was enrolled in this new dance school, she blossomed. She made loads of new friends, she started modeling, which was something she was very proud of, and she met a boy, Manny, who she absolutely adored. But as well as things seemed to be going for Rachel at her new school, she would soon make a fateful decision that would have absolutely catastrophic effects.
Okay, I get it. I get it. People are going to harp on me like, no, shut up. Shut up. Because I have a very good idea of where this is going. Very good idea. And Bub, look, okay, I get it. I get it. They want their girl to be happy and all these things, right? But she wasn't born with this fear of everything, okay? And they had to get her to a dance studio, which is cool, right? Which is cool. I mean, look, okay, I get it. She went to a dance studio, she made friends, she opened up, she came out of her shell. That's all cool, dandy, and nice. How well did the parents vet everybody? Is there like a rule for their one of their precious daughters to not get too deeply involved with anyone that has not spent some time with the parents and with the sisters? Hmm? How well did they look into all of this? Now I get it. Okay, people are going to say, well, not everybody has your training badger. Well, here's the thing is that if you care very much about your kids, you're going to take every single avenue of approach possible. And a lot of those avenues of approach, a lot of those TTPs and SOPs, are actually derived from a consistent and concurrent rotation. And that rotation is derived from basically human survivability. So, plenty of this was trial and error. A lot of it. And it's the same thing with being a parent. You don't learn everything from your parents, but you can learn a huge amount. If you have good parents, you'll have a solid foundation to operate off of. And then from there, you can test the waters yourself. And you can learn through trial and error the best ways to when you have kids. I'm only talking to certain types of people. Everybody else, it doesn't matter to you because you're not going to have kids. Y'all believe in the dumb stuff. But yeah, you're going to do everything you can to learn the most efficient, effective, ways of keeping your family protected. You protected and your kids protected. Because y'all are your first line of defense. Not the police and not the law. At least those of us who understand, accept, and live in reality do. Everybody else lives in some weird falsity bubble or whatever. So yeah, how well did they go through that school? Did they meet everybody? Are they a consistent presence? Do they randomly show up? Right? Does their daughter trust them so implicitly as to talk to them about everything? Right? Literally everything. My house, my rules, no privacy. And the no privacy part, everybody's going to be like, oh my God. No, you're my child. I brought you into this world. I'm not going to see you taken out of it because you're hiding something from me that turns out to be fatal. No, that's not a risk worth taking. But anyway, y'all get where I'm going with this. Let's keep going.
On Monday, March 1st of 1999, so 5 months after Rachel had transferred to this new dance school, Rachel and her father, Michael, like every other morning, left the Barber household, climbed into Michael's car, and began driving to Wattle Park, which was a train station closest to their house. From Wattle Park, Rachel would catch a train that would take her to the Richmond station, and then she would get off. She would meet up with a friend, they would have breakfast, and they would walk the rest of the way to their dance school. When Michael pulled into the parking lot at Wattle Park and parked the car, and Rachel was getting her stuff to climb out of the vehicle to head up to the train, he stopped his daughter and said, "Hey, remember, I'll be back here at 6:15 tonight to pick you up." And Rachel looked at him, she smiled and said, "Okay," and then she hopped out of the car and she pranced her way over to the station. Michael watched his daughter just long enough to see her climb the steps and disappear, at which point he put his car back in drive, he left the lot, and he headed back home. That evening, Michael returned to Wattle Park. But at 6:15 p.m., when the train came rolling into the station, Rachel was not on board. Michael assumed his daughter must have been running late and so missed the train she would always take, and so he just sat in the parking lot and waited for the next train to come into the station. And a few minutes later, when it pulled into the station, Rachel was not on that train either. And so Michael, he was starting to get worried because he's looking outside, it's getting dark, he knows his daughter hates being out in the dark, she's afraid of being alone, and he's wondering, what's going on with her, but he keeps telling himself that she's bound to show up any minute. And so Michael just sat in this parking lot and watched train after train after train come through the station, and Rachel wasn't on any of them. Now, Michael didn't have a cell phone, and neither did Rachel, so he couldn't just call her to see where she was. But finally, after a few more trains came through and none of them contained his daughter, he left the parking lot but went to his parents' house, which was much closer than his own home, and he rushed inside and he grabbed their phone and he called back to his home. And when his wife, Elizabeth, Rachel's mom, picked up the phone, he immediately asked her, "Hey, is Rachel home? Did she get a ride home from one of her friends?" And Elizabeth would tell Michael, "No, she's not here and she hasn't called." This was the moment when Michael and Elizabeth instinctively knew something had to be wrong. Rachel was on time for everything, and if she was late, she would always call ahead or call afterwards and at least give some explanation. But to just go silent and not show up, that was not in character. And again, because it was pitch black outside and they knew she was probably alone, that was a situation they knew Rachel would never want to be in because it would have terrified her. And so Michael tells Elizabeth he's going to come home as fast as he can. They hang up. And then while Elizabeth is waiting for her husband to return, she picked the phone right back up and she dialed Manny's number. That's Rachel's boyfriend. She figured maybe Rachel was with Manny, or at the very least, maybe she checked in with Manny because most nights Rachel and Manny spoke on the phone. But when Manny picked up the phone, he would tell Elizabeth that he hasn't seen Rachel since earlier in the day, and she has not called him, which to him was odd. When Elizabeth asked Manny, what was my daughter doing when you were with her last? Manny would say, "Oh, we went out to a shopping mall near the school in Richmond, and we went to the shoe store, and Rachel actually walked up to a very particular set of shoes. They were these big platform blue chunky shoes, and she said that she was going to buy them the next day, and she was really excited about it." And Elizabeth, as she's hearing this, she knew exactly the shoes that Manny was describing, because just the day before, Rachel had taken her mom, Elizabeth, to the shoe store and pleaded with her to get those blue chunky platform shoes. But when Elizabeth had looked at the price tag, they were $100, and so they were too expensive. And so as Elizabeth is hearing Manny say that her daughter is talking about how she's going to buy these shoes the next day, Elizabeth is thinking, with what money? Rachel has no money. How could she possibly afford those shoes? And so she asked Manny, did Rachel say how she planned on affording those blue shoes? And Manny would say, actually, yeah. She told me that she had this secret job, but she wouldn't give me any more details about it. And she said that with the money from this secret job, she'd be able to buy these shoes. Manny would tell Elizabeth that Rachel really stressed that this secret job was nothing to worry about. It was nothing immoral. But as Elizabeth is listening to Manny tell her this, all her alarm bells are going off. She could not fathom any job that would require a 15-year-old girl to go out by herself at night doing something that was secret and give absolutely no information to her family. Every possibility just seemed bad. After hanging up the phone with Manny, Elizabeth began frantically calling all of Rachel's friends and acquaintances and different locations around town that she knew her daughter would frequent, but nobody had any information about where Rachel was. A little while later, Michael finally pulled into the driveway, and when he went inside, he talked to his wife briefly, but he could tell they had no new information. Their daughter was still not home. This was becoming a crisis. And so very quickly, Michael just left the house, got right back into his car, and he drove to the police station. But when he got to the police station, the police didn't really offer the response that he was hoping for. From the police's perspective, it sounded like a teenage girl has been missing for a few hours, and so in their mind, they're thinking, one, that's not an emergency yet, and two, she probably just kind of ran off. Teenagers do that, they come back the next day, it's normal. And so despite Michael's pleas to the police that no, this is different, my daughter would never do that, she would never run away, this is totally out of character, despite all those pleas, the police said, look, Michael, just go home, wait, your daughter will be home soon, and if for some reason in the next few days she does not come back home, you come back and you tell us. And so Michael, now feeling totally devastated and terrified for his daughter's safety, finally did just leave the police station and he headed back home. And then he and his wife and his 2 other daughters had a terrible, restless night's sleep, wondering what was going on with Rachel.
I'm pretty sure y'all can guess what comes next. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to try hard not to spoil it for you. Really hard. Really hard. But remember what I said earlier about willy-nilly? That's going to become very important pretty soon here. Seriously. What were they thinking?
And then finally, when the sun came up the next morning,
and everybody's going to say, oh, you're victim blaming. Not really. Not really. It's on the parents, but also on the individual engaging in whatever decisions they're making. People have personal responsibility in some degree. It's just varying degrees. Right? As a civilian, I'm never, ever going back to Afghanistan. That is... I should be able to go back to Afghanistan. I mean, we left. So it should be fine. But actually, no. People are still being killed over there. I should be able to go back to Iraq. And go see if there's certain people alive in certain places that I haven't seen in a while. But that'd be foolish. And I know it is. So yeah, if I were to do that, heck, I could go back to Ukraine. But if I were to do that, the chances of me dying and leaving my son without a father is so much higher. And I'm aware of that. So yeah, make of that what you will.
Michael and Elizabeth rushed out of their bedroom and headed into the kitchen, hoping, praying that Rachel would just magically be in their house again. But when they went into the kitchen, Rachel wasn't there. She had not come home. However, pretty early on this second day of Rachel's disappearance, Michael and Elizabeth would learn something new. Manny would get in touch with Michael and Elizabeth, and he would tell them that he remembered something Rachel had said during their final conversation the day before. She had told Manny that he had nothing to worry about with regards to this secret job because it wasn't immoral, it was totally safe. And, Manny said, Rachel said there was an old female friend who was going to be there at this job site in some way participating that would keep her safe. And so Michael and Elizabeth have no idea what to make of this old female friend, but in a way it was kind of a relief because they know their daughter is basically terrified to be alone. And so at least knowing wherever she was with this old friend, that made them feel good. But the parents' positivity about this new development quickly faded when they began calling around to all of Rachel's friends, both new and old, female and otherwise, and none of them were missing. Everybody was where they were supposed to be, and nobody knew anything about what happened to Rachel. The only intel the parents got from this round of calling all of her friends was that several of her friends said that the day before, the day Rachel disappeared, they had walked with Rachel back to the train station after school. And in fact, one of the friends told Michael and Elizabeth that they offered Rachel a ride home so that she wouldn't have to ride the train back home, but Rachel had turned it down, saying her father was going to be meeting her on the other end at Wattle Park at 6:15 p.m. The Barbers didn't know what to make of this. Did Rachel believe at the time that she could go do this secret job and still be back in time to meet her father at 6:15 at Wattle Park? Or did she lie to the friend who was offering the ride and make up the story that she planned on seeing her father when in reality she planned on ditching her father and going and doing this secret job for the night? But regardless of which of these things were true, the parents just still could not understand why by now, 24 hours later, their daughter still had not called to check in. Michael and Elizabeth found themselves wondering if they really knew their Rachel Starr as well as they thought they did. Maybe she had actually run away, like the police suggested. The parents were totally distraught, they were totally anxious and terrified, and so with nothing else to do, over the next several days, they just continued to go out and look everywhere and talk to everyone to try to find where their daughter was. But everything they looked into turned into a dead end. Then, finally, on Monday, March 8th, so exactly 1 week since Rachel had disappeared, Michael and Elizabeth got a new lead. A girl named Allison, who had gone to a dance class with Rachel before Rachel had transferred schools, had overheard her younger sister talking about the Rachel Barber disappearance and how nobody had seen or heard from Rachel since 5:45 p.m. the previous Monday. Allison, who had not heard about Rachel's disappearance until this very moment, knew immediately she had to go forward and talk to police because she actually saw Rachel on the night she disappeared, a full hour after her last known sighting. At 6:40 p.m. on the night Rachel disappeared, Allison was on the train car headed to Praran, which is a suburb located southeast of where Rachel lived. And when this train that Allison was on pulled into the Richmond station and the doors opened up, Allison watched as Rachel, along with this other girl who Allison didn't recognize, walked on board and then took seats right next to each other on the other end of the train away from Allison. Now, from Allison's perspective, immediately it was clear they were friends. They were laughing and joking together and just kind of in their own world. And so Allison didn't want to be rude, so she stopped staring at them, and they continued riding the train until they got to the Praran station, at which point Allison got up to leave the train. But as she did, she saw Rachel and this mystery girl. They also had stood up, and they were making their way out of the door. And as they were leaving, Rachel actually would look up and see Allison, and they would both smile and wave at each other. But that was it. And then Allison would watch as Rachel and her friend would leave ahead of her, and they would walk down the platform. And from Allison's perspective, it seemed obvious that Rachel and this girl were friends, and whatever they were going to go do, they were choosing to go do, and they were going to do together. When Michael and Elizabeth heard about this sighting of their daughter on the train and this mystery girl, on the one hand, it was kind of reassuring because it meant that Rachel was with this friend, potentially the old female friend that Rachel mentioned to Manny, and so whatever she was doing, at least she was not alone. But on the other hand, it begged the question of what role did this mystery person play in wherever Rachel was now?
Okay, so what is the deal with okay, you know what, I'll just come out and say this instead of asking a question at all. If your children have a friend they will not introduce you to or let you know about, something's not right. Something's absolutely not right. That's a fact.
Had Rachel and this mystery girl gone to do this secret job together and then something happened to them? Or had this mystery girl been Rachel's accomplice and they had run off together like the police thought? Whatever the case was, the Barbers and the police at this point, who were looking much more seriously into the Barber case by now, they knew the next step was identifying this mystery girl. A couple of days later, on Thursday, March 11th, the police called in an artist to create a sketch of this mystery girl that Allison had seen on the train. Allison would describe this mystery girl as being older than Rachel, being heavier than Rachel, and very plain. That day, the police also ordered a trace on all of the phone calls going into the Barber residence on the day before she went missing, because they figured that if Rachel and this mystery girl were in cahoots on some sort of secret thing together, they likely communicated the day before. And when the phone call trace came back, there was one phone number in particular that stood out to police. There was a private phone number that called the Barber household twice on the day before Rachel disappeared. Once at 5:24 p.m., and that call lasted about 15 minutes.
Private number, huh? I totally couldn't have guessed that one. Let me know in the comments at this point in time. Like, give me the timestamp. I forgot you could do that. Give me the timestamp if you're starting to understand where this is going. Because I'm already very certain about the ending of this one, which is why I'm mostly sitting here in silence, just like, But yeah, private number, huh? Private number? Wonder why they don't want anybody to know who they actually are and what their number is. Interesting.
And then shortly after that call ended, the private number called back, and then there was another conversation that lasted about 30 minutes. It would take police another 24 hours, but eventually they would figure out who this private caller was. It was a 20-year-old woman named Caroline Robertson, who very closely resembled the police sketch of the mystery girl that Allison had seen on the train.
Closely resembled, huh? I mean, I guess, sorta, but I'm just like, this freaking photo, this sketch. I mean, it's kind of rough, my dude. This looks like something even I could not do, and I'll be trying to do this at the very least. I'm not an artist. That's what I'm saying. So like, but yeah, seriously, this. I mean, it's a lot better than anything I could do, honestly. But I mean, come on, you get paid to do this all the time, seriously, and this is like how like I don't know. Let's go.
And it just so happened that Caroline Robertson lived very close to the Praron train station where Allison saw the mystery girl and Rachel get off. Additionally, Caroline was Rachel's old babysitter and was very close with the Barber family. And so it seemed very likely that Caroline was both the mystery girl on the train and the old female friend that Rachel had mentioned to Manny when she told him about this secret job.
Huh. I kind of wonder why this person who was pretty close to the family knew about where Rachel went and what she did and why. I wonder why they haven't said anything about seeing Rachel the night she disappeared. I wonder. I wonder why.
This new information was a huge relief. From Michael and Elizabeth's perspective and the police's perspective, it now seemed very likely that Rachel and Caroline had just snuck off together and were now probably hiding out at Caroline's apartment near the Praron train station. And so, believing they could put an end to this missing teenager drama that night, the police hopped in their cars and they drove over to Caroline's apartment. But when they got there at 5:25 p.m., they very quickly realized that things were not as they seemed. Police walked up to Caroline's front door and they knocked and began yelling out for Caroline and Rachel to come outside, but nobody yelled back and nobody opened the door. When they tried the handle, they found it was locked, so they got in touch with the property's real estate agent, who came out and gave them a set of spare keys, and when the police tried those keys, they found they still could not open the door because the door had been locked from the inside with a special latch. And so the police began walking around the perimeter of the building looking for another way inside. And as they're walking, one of the officers looks up and sees a second floor window of the apartment is open, and it's open enough that clearly a person could slip inside. And so the police contacted the fire department, who showed up very quickly, and they put a ladder up against the side of the apartment that went up to that open window.
You know, what if I am entirely wrong in my conclusion that I haven't given to you yet? Because now this went and snapped in a whole other direction than what I was expecting, except to a certain degree, right? I'm still right about the child not talking to the parents and telling them everything and anything that they're doing, including the secret job. Like, no, tell your parents about that. Also, I don't know if the parents were aware that the old babysitter was the one who was, hanging out with their daughter sometimes. I'm not sure if they knew about that. And number 3, she chose to engage in this clandestine behavior. It doesn't matter what the ultimate intention or whatever it is. That's irrelevant. It's the fact that she's engaging in clandestine behavior under her parents' radar. And she's choosing to do so is what it seems like. But what if something has just gone horribly wrong and the old babysitter and Rachel were the ones that were made victim of somebody else, a third party. Because this part of it throws a lot of doubts on my immediate conclusion that I had locked in. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Y'all ready to continue and see what's happening? Let's go.
And then a police officer began climbing up. And when he got up to the window and could look inside, he saw he was looking into a bedroom. And at first, it looked totally ordinary until he noticed there was a body lying face down at the foot of the bed on the ground. It was Caroline. The officer on the ladder immediately turned around and yelled for backup, and then he and other officers poured into the apartment, and before long, Caroline, who did actually still have a pulse, but she was totally unconscious and not responding, she was being rushed to the hospital. And while that was happening, the remainder of the officers who were on site, they all went into the apartment to try to find Rachel. And so as they're searching this apartment, which was totally messy, there was things everywhere, there were boxes everywhere, it almost looked like Carolyn had been packing her apartment to move, potentially, when something happened to her, causing her to fall unconscious inside of her bedroom. And so the police searched this apartment top to bottom, and they did not find Rachel. In fact, there was no trace of Rachel anywhere, except they did find a bag of clothes that looked like they were Rachel's size, not Caroline's size, but it wasn't clear if those were actually Rachel's clothes. And so the police just kind of walked around the apartment, gathering up anything that seemed suspicious, like they found rubber gloves and hair dye, they found some bank receipts and some notebooks with some strange writing in them, and they just hoped that some of this stuff might lead to Rachel. Back at the hospital, Caroline had regained consciousness, and even though she was very disoriented and seemed kind of out of it, the medical staff allowed the police to come in right away and start asking questions because they knew time was of the essence with Rachel. They had to find her. And so the officers came into Caroline's room, and they sat down, and the first question they asked her was, "Do you know where Rachel Barber is?" And Caroline just stood there kind of stunned for a second, and then just said, "Yes." Over the next few months, as Caroline's memory came back into focus, she would piece together one of the most unbelievable stories that police in Melbourne had ever heard. The following is a reconstruction of that story based both on Caroline's testimony and on what police were able to actually fact check. Back on Sunday, February 28th, 1999, so the day before Rachel vanished, Caroline called Rachel and offered her a job. Caroline told Rachel that she was working on this psychology study and she needed participants. However, the study was highly confidential, so if Rachel did want to be a part of it, she wouldn't be able to tell anyone what she was doing. However, the study was quite lucrative for Rachel, and it really didn't require much of Rachel. All Rachel had to do was meet Caroline the following day after school was over at the Richmond train station, and then the two of them would ride the train to Prahran, they would get off, make their way to Caroline's apartment, and there they would conduct this psychological study, and when it was over, Caroline would pay Rachel $100 and the cost of transportation. And so Rachel, she was thrilled at the idea because she wanted those beautiful blue shoes, and so she said yes. So the next day, Monday,
Okay, I get there's certain reasons why some studies are confidential, right? But at the same time, that brings into question ethics, doesn't it? Ethical practices. Anyway, but yeah, I may have been somewhat branched off in a totally different direction than this because initially, this was starting to appear as like a general case of someone chooses to do something and then certain second, third, fourth, fifth parties fall upon this individual because of their decisions of getting themselves into that situation, right? But now it looks like it's jumped to somewhere else. Now I'm a bit unsure. Private number, confidential study. It sounds like I keep on hearing screaming. It's so weird. Um, but yeah, let me know if y'all can hear that through the mic. It's either screaming or something else. I know there's dogs barking, but there's dogs barking all the time. Yeah, where was I? Oh yeah, so I was going in a totally different direction because, usually the creative types for parents are the very lackadaisical types as parents. And that is inherently very dangerous for children. Very dangerous. Um, so yeah. And then everything else was tracking a certain direction. But then at this point now it's branched off completely. Very interesting. All right, let's continue. My bad. I'm just musing through my thoughts.
March 1st, Rachel wrapped up school. She made her way to the Richmond train station. She connected with Caroline. They hopped on board the train. They made their way to Praran, with Allison spotting them on the train as they went. And then when they got off the train at Praran, Caroline and Rachel would make their way to a nearby pizza shop and get a pizza and some beer, and then they would walk the rest of the way to Caroline's apartment. Once they were inside the apartment, Caroline led them upstairs to her bedroom, and then they both sat down on the floor at the foot of the bed and began eating their pizza and having some beer and just laughing and exchanging some stories. And then after their dinner was over, Caroline told Rachel it was time to start the study, and it began with a guided meditation. Sitting next to Rachel, Caroline told her to stay calm, think happy thoughts, close your eyes, and just begin to breathe in nice and slow, breathe out nice and slow, and just feel yourself breathing in and out. And so Rachel did as she was told and began breathing in and out and being very calm. And Caroline, at this point, she stood up and began kind of pacing around the room, watching Rachel periodically and reminding her to think happy thoughts and stay calm and keep just listening to herself breathe in and breathe out. And then at some point, Caroline just stopped and stood right in front of Rachel and just stared at her really intently. And at some point, Caroline was confident that the drugs she had laced in the pizza that she had given Rachel were starting to take an effect. It looked like Rachel was starting to doze off. And so at that point, Caroline walked around behind Rachel, who still had her eyes closed. She's still doing the study. And Caroline pulled out a telephone cord. She wrapped it around Rachel's neck, and she pulled it as tight as she could. Immediately, Rachel came out of her trance, and she reached up and began trying to pull the cord off of her
Okay, so it was exactly what I thought it was. Okay.
neck. But Caroline was easily 50.
Damn it. Well, that's disappointing. Disappointing in every single way, even though I was correct in my initial assumption. Confidential study, that's questionable ethics. Calling with a blocked phone number or an unknown phone number or a privatized phone number, also suspicious. Behavior, suspicious. Getting food before doing what should be a study. I don't know. I've done multiple studies myself. They've never given me food beforehand. Ever. That's just my personal experience, though. It might be different for everybody else. Very strange. So basically, I was right all along, and there was like a little bit of a, there's a bit of like a, it was a line, and then there was like a bit of a bow in the line. Okay, let's keep going.
50 pounds heavier than Rachel and easily was able to maintain control over Rachel. And so Rachel is squirming and fighting and scratching and doing everything she can to try to get this cord off, but she can't. And eventually the fight just leaves her body and she goes still. Caroline would maintain tension on that cord to ensure Rachel was dead, but then eventually she would release the tension on the cord, at which point she would drag Rachel's body into a nearby closet and she would shut the door. 2 days later, Caroline would open that closet up and she would drag Rachel's body back out of the closet with the cord still wrapped around her neck. And she would roll Rachel's body up in a carpet and then stuff her inside of a large army duffel bag that Caroline had purchased for this exact reason.
And watch. Caroline was like, she's too pretty and she makes me feel bad about myself because I'm not as pretty or as good looking as her. Or something like that. Something related to it.
for disposing Rachel's body. And then she called a taxi who came to her apartment, and she lugged Rachel's body still inside of this bag and dumped it in the taxi. And then she and Rachel's body and the taxi driver drove about an hour north to rural Kilmore, where Caroline's father had a vacation home. And there she would bury Rachel's body in a shallow grave next to one of her childhood pets. When Caroline had been rushed to the hospital because she was found unconscious in her bedroom by police, the assumption was she and probably Rachel had been attacked, and that was why Caroline was unconscious. But what really happened is Caroline was in her apartment and she saw the police show up, and it made her so stressed that it triggered a seizure, and that was why she passed out in her bedroom. When she came to in the hospital and people began asking her what happened, she would say that Rachel's death was an accident. However, months later, after investigators had gone through all of the evidence they had collected from Caroline's apartment, they discovered Rachel's death was anything but accidental. According to the notebooks they found all over Caroline's apartment, which were basically Caroline's journals, Caroline hated herself. She totally loathed her physical image and who she was, and she was obsessed with the girl she used to babysit, Rachel Barber. Rachel was this beautiful, perfect person that Caroline wished she could be. And so one day, Caroline decided she would just stop being Caroline and would literally become Rachel. And to do that, she would kill Rachel and assume her identity. The secret job, the psychology study that Caroline offered Rachel, was a very intentional trap. She knew Rachel wanted money for things like those blue shoes, and she knew Rachel would trust Caroline. Caroline was her babysitter, and so Rachel would have no problem going into Caroline's apartment alone at night to
If this girl would have ran maybe 5 miles a day and put in some effort, seriously, put in some effort. No excuses. No excuses. All right, I've been broken, busted, and wrecked every single way almost possible without losing limbs. If I can do it, anybody can. And I'm nothing special. Anyway, but yeah, like I said earlier, this was a crime of passion. Because she was she was in that place where it was the self-loathing was so strong. She completely locked out the possibility of her being able to change herself. So she decided to kill someone else's beautifully, naturally born beauty of a daughter. What kind of leftism kind of crap is this? No, seriously, it is. You don't think it is? Okay. Hatred of naturally beautiful things. No acceptance of reality. And zero willingness to make a change. Zero. To change for the better, at least. An absolute detest for any kind of symbols of purity and innocence. If she had just ran 5 miles a day, she'd be really good looking. Really good looking. Really good looking. But because this was ingrained so deep into her, she instead made the decision to do something evil. And then, also, where the heck are her parents? Where are the parents at? See, this is, man, this is why I tell people, don't compromise safety and security. vet everybody. And if your kids have anybody they hang out with that they wouldn't bring back to you or introduce you to or allow you to randomly show up and stuff like that, they're hiding something. And make your kids aware of stuff like this as they get older. Let them know stuff like this. It's better that they assume every single stranger is a potential threat to their life than, or better yet, train your kids to respond accordingly. Okay, this is kind of weird. Why can't I tell my parents about this? Oh, you're saying, okay, then I'm not going to have anything to do with this then. Oh, I can't tell my parents about this party because they wouldn't be cool with it? Okay, I can't have anything to do with this party then. Bye. Seriously, it's as simple as ingraining in your children the reality of very clear and present danger that surrounds each and every one of us and the steps to take accordingly. Right? Also, the openness of communication between child and parent. Like, look, I need you to tell me everything. Otherwise, something like this can happen to you. Because I love you and I don't want to see you die before I do. All right, let's continue.
Get the money. Caroline planned to murder Rachel and stage it so it looked like Rachel had run away. And then afterwards, Caroline planned to lose 45 pounds and then get a nose job so she would look more like Rachel. And then to complete her transformation.
After the fact, are you freaking kidding me? Are you freaking kidding? And yet everybody says that toxic masculinity has no use. Well, this toxically masculine male has gotten hundreds of people to lose weight, get into the best physical shape of their lives, recover from injuries, and rock on. And yes, I absolutely do fat shaming. I absolutely do. Hell, I fat shame myself all the time. Because I'm never happy with how I look. I could have my 7-pack and be shredded as hell and still not be happy. But yeah. After effect though, seriously? How about you get off your butt? Start doing shit right now. Anyway, God, this stuff pisses me off. It makes me so angry. This is what happens when you allow the victim mentality to take hold. Right? It's like, oh, yeah. All right, let's continue.
Caroline would legally change her name to Rachel Barber. In November of 2000, Caroline Robertson pleaded guilty to murdering Rachel Barber and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In January of 2015, Caroline was released after only serving 15 of those 20 years. In the years after Rachel's death, Rachel's mother, Elizabeth, would write a book about the experience called The Perfect Victim, which would later be adapted into a major movie that starred some of Australia's biggest actors and actresses. On Wednesday, March 24th, 1999, Rachel Barber's body was once again lowered into the ground, except this time she was surrounded by friends and family and people who loved her. Over 850 people attended Rachel's funeral. They brought letters and poems and toys, which were all buried with Rachel, as were the blue shoes that Rachel so wanted that she planned to buy with the $100 Caroline had promised her.
I hope they put those shoes on her feet so that she could walk into, well, if heaven exists, that is. So she could walk into heaven, at least be happy about that. Man. Ugh. Why do people have to be so people-y? Well, because people are sheep. People are sheep, they're NPCs. Gosh damn. Gosh damn. It's absolute crap is what it is. bad parenting, people refusing to take accountability and responsibility for their own lives. Just like we're such a mess in so many ways. We are so screwed. We're so screwed. Okay, maybe not me personally completely, because like if the entire world basically comes to an end, I'll be able to keep myself and my son alive for decades, no matter where we go. Hell, I could do it in the desert. I know how. And then my son would be one hell of a badass like desert survivor. Like when he grows up and Daryl Dad's taught him everything he can to not finally die. Like, he's just coming out of the desert like tattoos that he made himself or something, a spear and shit, because there's no guns or ammo anymore. Like, I just come up with these hilarious imaginal fictions in my head all the time about how cool my son will be when he's older. I look forward to it. I really do. Anyway, like I said, I may not be immediately like screwed and totally dead if like shit hits the fan, but your average person most certainly is. Most certainly. Because nobody's ready, nobody's prepared, and things are so freaking topsy-turvy, like I said, in every which way, shape, and form. Whatever. People going people, like I say. People going people. I shouldn't get worked up over it, but I do.
So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today.
There we go, folks. There we go. The world's worst babysitter from MrBallen. And the murderer only served 15 years. Only served 50. Are you freaking kidding me, Australia? Are you kidding? Why does it seem like the justice systems of the world are becoming more and more lefty? Why? Why is that? They're just doesn't. This shit gets me worked up. If you couldn't tell already, but yeah, 15 years. Serious? She killed somebody. Okay, she should die the same way that she killed the person that she did. Okay? She should die the same way. The punishment should fit the crime. Okay? Get that phone cord from that phone in the Justice Department somewhere that they never answer. Like, Bub, this is... this shit just... Okay, woosah, woosah, woosah. I am righteously angered by stuff like this. Because it's so frustrating. Because it's so avoidable. It's so absolutely within someone's control. But people, like I said, they fail at being parents in the worst ways possible. And then, of course, you know, I don't care what age you are. If you make a dumb decision, if you make like really dumb decisions, people are going to say like, oh, no, they don't know what they're doing. If you're hiding shit from your parents, obviously you do. Why are you going to hide this from your parents? Why are you going to hide something from your parents, right? And they're going to say, oh, victim shaming. No. But you can't take all of the blame off of the victim either. Because they did make mistakes. They did. But again, it falls on the parents. To a heavy degree. Because the parents are the ones that raised them. Right? And the parents weren't keeping up with like what's going on with like their kids' friends and family and whatever. It's just like, okay, fine. Take all the responsibility away. But it still goes back to the parents. Like, who are they letting their daughter hang out with? Did they even know? Obviously not. They had no idea she was hanging out with their old babysitter at all. Or that she was in contact. They didn't know what their daughter could possibly have been doing. I don't know, y'all. This has got me so many freaking ways. So many ways. But anyway, this video is long enough as it is, so you let me know. You let me know what you think in the comments down below. Some of y'all are going to hate comment, I know, because you'll be like, oh, you shouldn't blame the victims. Well, yeah, I'll just leave it there then, right? I'll leave it there. But yeah, freaking hell, y'all. Freaking hell. What did y'all think? Y'all let me know in the comments down below. All right, you know what time it is. Description box, there's a bunch of things in there. There's buttons underneath the video. Click those things. Clickety click. There's a Discord link, merch link, donor link, join button link in the description box down below. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, actually, be good, be safe, make a good life for yourselves. Right? Disaster is only ever a second away. Right? And don't compromise on safety and security. Don't be paranoid. It's better to be paranoid and way overstressed about it than it is to be completely and totally a sheep. All right? So, that being said, I'm off. I'll see you on the next one. Badger out.